Hello, people. It's the woke centrist here today, and we're going to take a look at Kyle Kulinsky's interview with Jordan Peterson. And I was pretty surprised. I thought it was a pretty good interview. And one of the things I like about this interview in particular is that it doesn't seem like a whole lot of competent left wing people kind of debate or at least press Jordan Peterson on some issues. I think Kyle did an okay job, but yeah, we're gonna go ahead and take a look and critique it and just throw some stuff out there. But let me go ahead and press play.
If you were an American citizen, you were here in the 2020 election, would you have voted for Trump, Biden, nobody, or a third-party candidate?
I don't know. It's very hard to answer those questions until you're actually in the situation. When Clinton was facing off against Trump, for a very long time, I felt that I would have voted for Clinton. I felt that she had at least the administrative background and the governmental experience to know what the job was and to handle it. I felt that Trump was a wild card, which he most definitely was. Then I went to this, the night of the election, I went to this Republican gala in Canada at a private club watching the election, and they did a straw vote there. And in the straw vote, I cast my vote for Trump. And that surprised me. And it was something I sort of switched on last minute. And the reason I switched, I would say, is because I thought Clinton betrayed the working class. In fact,
I think I'm pretty much in good agreement here with Jordan as far as how Clinton basically, betrayed the working class. A lot of people saw that as one of the big downfalls. She failed to appeal to the working class. And I think that Jordan has a pretty good assessment here about why Clinton was a bad choice.
that's why she lost the election. It isn't something I just felt. That's definitely what happened. And so I thought, to hell with you. I'd rather have this wild card in here with his spontaneous lies than have you in here with your programmatic, powered, mad, driven, pre-authorized lies. So I don't know. It's hard to tell what you'll do in a situation until you're actually in it.
Now, about the lies, it does sound like Jordan is putting forth the idea that this was more of a lesser evil type of vote for him, rather than him genuinely liking anything about the candidate as far as policies goes, just by comparison how bad they lie. That's kind of his metric and choice here. So seems like it's more of a lesser evil thing for Jordan Peterson in this instance.
Do you think Trump as president in his 4 years also betrayed the working class?
Not in the same manner, no.
Really?
And I think Trump did some things that were really quite spectacular.
Like
one
what?
of them.
Like what?
Well, how about no war?
Okay, so I kind of thought this was a bit of a dodge by Jordan Peterson. Instead of talking about Trump's record on working class issues, he kind of just goes right into some of Trump's strengths. So it's an interesting dodge here that Peterson employed.
Well, he did assassinate a top Iranian commander who was fighting ISIS
I didn't
on the ground.
say that. I didn't say anything about assassination. I said something very specific.
I would say that's an act of war.
No, it's not an act of war. It's an assassination. An act
To
of
kill
war
an Iranian
involves-
commander?
I don't understand the point you're making.
Well, I'm trying to say if the Iranians killed one of our generals, we would call that an act of war. We do it to them and it's not an act of war?
All right, then I guess we have to differentiate between an act of war and a war. What you have right now with Russia, that's a war. And Trump did not engage the U.S. in a war of that sort.
No, he didn't. but he did engage us or keep us engaged in very similar wars. One is the Yemen, providing basically the same thing that is going on with Ukraine, except it's Yemen. Yemen doesn't get any media coverage whatsoever, and that's pretty sad. And I'm pretty sure that the situation is much worse off in Yemen. We did supply Saudi Arabia with arms to fight, these people. And I don't know. I can't say that Trump was any better, since he did provide arms to Saudi Arabia to fight in Yemen. It's kind of an equivalent deal here, except when we're talking about Ukraine, um, the fight in Yemen is a completely offensive war. And when it comes to Ukraine, we're helping provide defense in the sale of weapons to Ukraine. So it's kind of an apples and oranges comparison. But if you compare those two things, I don't think Trump fared any better than the Ukraine war that's going on now.
And so that was a signal contribution. He also established the Abrahamic Accords, which have got nowhere near enough attention, not nearer the attention they deserve. And the people who negotiated that should have won a Nobel Peace Prize, because that brings the possibility of peace to the Middle East. And that was a big accomplishment. Both of
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know if you can call it an accomplishment, because he does denote that it brings the possibility. What if that possibility never comes? So it's hard to judge whether those accords will actually amount to anything. It could happen that things boil up again in the Middle East, where it gets pretty bad. So far we haven't seen any net positives for these accords as of yet. So I don't know. I think it's kind of a non-accomplishment as of yet. It's something that history is going to have to play out a little bit before we can call this a win on Trump's part.
those things.
Do you consider the giant increase in drone strikes under Trump problematic?
What do you mean problematic? You mean desirable?
Do you, because you said, oh, he didn't get us in a new war, but I would consider all those bombings, which are illegal, by the way, an act of war. Do you think that those are...
I didn't say that Trump's record was unblemished or that there weren't skirmishes of various sorts. I'm not trying to paint him beige, or I'm not trying to whitewash him. I'm perfectly aware of Trump's flaws and his advantages. But he didn't embroil the U.S. in a war. And you guys have been embroiled in a pointless war for what? How long now? Since the 1960s? One after another. And then the Abraham Accords are a big deal. And did he betray the working class? Well, I think that's in some sense it's a vague question. Hillary definitely betrayed the working class because she decided to go with the woke mob instead of instead of the typical.
Yeah, so here's a problem. I think it's hard to know literally what would have happened if Hillary was elected. The woke mob, whatever that's supposed to mean. I guess she's talking about her engaging in culture war rhetoric, However, if Trump engages in the same rhetoric, it's not even remotely as the same. It's not treated the same by Peterson. So I don't know. It's hard to say what would have happened if Hillary gotten in. I do believe she probably would have been more pro-war, more so than Trump. But as far as the working class, it's unclear what would have happened with Hillary. But it is pretty clear that that Trump didn't really hold to his promises when it came to resolving some working class issues.
typical base of power
Well,
that the Democrats had always relied on. So
can I give
that was
you
a
an
conscious
example?
decision.
Can I give you an
Sure.
example on Trump betraying the working class? Because there's a few things you could point to. First of all, there was net outsourcing of jobs under his administration when he campaigned as the opposite. The second thing is his number one legislative accomplishment was a 2017 tax cut where 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%. So those are two examples of, he campaigned as the anti-outsourcing guy. Then there was net outsourcing under his administration. And in fact, that same tax bill incentivized outsourcing. And then again, that tax bill mostly benefited the wealthy, and it didn't help the working class. So that's what I mean by betraying the working class. I think he campaigned in a very populist way, but in terms of how he governed, it was very sort of standard establishment Republican, just like George W. Bush, for example.
Yeah, well, I don't have any real comments on that. Like I said, I'm not trying to whitewash the Trump administration. I'm just pointing to a couple of things that he did that he hasn't got credit for.
Yeah,
And
you
should
called
have
him.
got credit for.
I actually enjoyed. You were on the PBD podcast, I think it was.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting about Kyle in general is he's usually willing to give opposition credit for the things he thought they do right. Kyle spends a lot of time bashing Biden, but there has been a few times in which he levied some praise. I know one of the things that Kyle really praised Biden for was his, the pullout in Afghanistan. So, yeah, I'll let this continue on here.
Was recently, and you made a comment that you found Trump whiny, particularly over the, common refrain that he can't stop saying he thinks the election was stolen. And correct me if I'm wrong, but your commentary was like, move on.
Well, I think it's a strategic error on his part at minimum. I mean, Trump portrays himself and thinks of himself as a winner. And part of his attractiveness on the populist front was his unabashed, victorious persona, let's say. And he's the guy that gets things done, and he's the guy that wins. But apparently, the election was stolen from him. And so that begs the question, are you the winner and the guy that gets things done, or are you the guy that lets things be stolen from you? And the answer that Trump had always had was, well, I'm not the guy. I'm not that guy. I don't know who else I am, but I'm definitely the winner here. And I think that now campaigning as if he was the victim, let's say, of a plot isn't going to do him any good. I think it was probably a fatal decision from a strategic perspective, because
Yeah, that's a reasonable, assessment of what happened with Trump, as it being an error. But it seems like Peterson is treating this more like it's an issue about optics, like how it looks versus what he did was wrong, lying about at least knowing, he was definitely influenced by some crazy people. And I don't know how delusional he was, versus connected to reality. But I think that's probably a bigger issue rather than the optics of him being a winner and trying to contest that so hard that you just kind of lose your grip on the reality of the situation.
it's so off-brand. And that has nothing, that's completely independent of whatever virtue the argument about the stolen election might have. Well, I don't believe that the judiciary in the United States is so corrupt that the possibility of a valid finding on the election fraud front has been reduced to zero. I don't find that credible. And I do think, so I also think that it's a mistake on that front. And it's a mistake for conservatives. It's a real mistake for conservatives to take that route, because conservatives can't say all the institutions are corrupt and untrustworthy. That's what the radical leftists say. And populist conservatives tend to do that. And that really leaves them with nothing except maybe an appeal to public whim. And that's no way to govern. So I think that was a mistake too.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different when we're talking about conservatives and what Jordan. It's like there's no such thing as just like left moderates in Jordan Peterson's eyes. It's just like conservatives, and then those opposing the conservatives are extreme radical leftists. So I think from a left perspective, one would say that, um, big government, conservatives are not pushing towards that. They want less government, and that is the particular institution that they don't find trustworthy, which is interesting because the whole stolen election thing and the whole big government and the deep state stuff, that that pretty much jives with the conservative view. But if you think about the left, and I'm not talking about the super woke left, I guess the populist left. So we're talking about like those who have a similar view, except they're targeted at big companies and corporations. So on one side, you have the conservatives who lose faith in big government institutions, big government. And then on the left side of the coin, you have those that lose faith in the big corporations. So and then they prefer the opposite. So, the conservatives prefer free market solutions, while the liberals prefer some solutions that perhaps only the government, absent of a profit motive, can solve in that case. So let's go ahead and continue here.
You in your commentary, I do often hear a strong defense of our institutions. And I do feel like one of the common things that defines the current political era is definitely populism that bubbles up on the left through the vessel of, say, a Bernie Sanders, and even what I would argue was a fake populism that came up on the right with Donald Trump, where the agreement does seem to be, well, hold on, these institutions are really not working for us, and they're broken, and they're fundamentally corrupt. And, the genesis of it being you have this donor class of corporations and billionaires that donates to politicians, and then they get elected and do the bidding of that donor class and the corporations. Do you disagree with that analysis? Do you think that that's just overstating the problem and the institutions are actually healthy? Or
I think it's partly a Tower of Babel problem. So I've been listening a fair bit to Russell Brand, who I quite like. Russell is very, very smart. He's definitely one of the smartest people I've ever met. He's unbelievably sharp. And he differs in his political utterances from me to a substantial degree, although there's a fair bit of commonality as well. He's beating the anti-capitalism drum in a manner that I tend not to. But there's a specific reason for that. And the reason is that Russell has realized that size is a problem. And the lefties tend to be skeptical of big government, and the right-wingers tend to be, the lefties tend to be skeptical of big companies, right, and the right-wingers tend to be skeptical of big government. Right. And I think the right way forward through all that mess is that we should be skeptical of big.
All right, guys, what you just saw was a
All right, so I thought that Jordan's last point there was actually pretty damn good. Skeptical of big. I think that's a great point to make, and I think that's a really centrist point to make. So you don't want government to be too big, and you don't want corporations to be too big. I think that's a great way to look at things, in my opinion. And I think Jordan Peterson got that spot on. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end this here as far as the video goes. So what I want to do, I think tomorrow I'm going to cover the other clip that Kyle has, and it's a clip of him talking to Jordan about his Twitter ban. I know I did a video about his Twitter ban, and you can check that out as well. But I'd like to comment on, his discussion with Jordan about that as well. All right, so if you like anything here, please like and subscribe and share. Let me know what you think in the comment section. That's always welcome for me. And thank you, and join us tomorrow. I'm going to do another stream and produce another video here about Jordan Peterson's comments on transgenderism. Good night.